There is a moment that comes quietly, often without warning. You meet someone new, hear their name clearly, and seconds later it is gone. You walk into a room and cannot remember what you came for. You reach for a word, a familiar name, a date you have known for years, and it simply is not there. For a brief instant, a question surfaces, uninvited and unwelcome. Is this how it begins? Is this the first step on a path that leads somewhere I do not want to go? Almost everyone over 50 has felt this. And almost everyone draws the same conclusion, that these small lapses are the early signs of inevitable decline. The first grains of sand slipping through an hourglass that cannot be turned. But this conclusion, as natural as it feels, may be wrong. It is based on an assumption about how memory works that modern research has quietly overturned. The truth is more hopeful and more demanding. The small gaps in your recall are not necessarily the beginning of the end. They are signals, messages from a system that is trying to function under conditions it was never designed for. And once you understand what those signals mean, once you learn to read the language of your own memory, the path forward becomes clearer. Not because you can stop time, but because you can work with the grain of your own biology instead of against it. What follows is not a promise of perfect recall. It is something more valuable, a map of the territory, drawn from decades of careful research, that shows how memory actually works and what it needs to serve you well for years to come. You are listening to the Longevity Library, where we archive the wisdom of healthy aging. The pattern of years, understanding memory and how it changes with time. There comes a moment, somewhere in midlife, when a name slips away just as you are about to speak it. You meet someone new, hear their name clearly, and minutes later it is gone. You walk into a room and cannot remember what you came for. These moments are so common, so universal, that they have become a kind of quiet joke among people of a certain age. But beneath the humor lies a genuine question. Is this simply how it goes? Is the gradual fading of memory an unavoidable part of growing older? The answer, it turns out, is more interesting than a simple yes or no. Memory does change with time, but the direction of that change is not inevitably downward. There are people in their 80s and 90s whose recall is sharp, whose minds remain quick, whose ability to take in new information rivals that of people decades younger. This tells us something important. The aging of memory is not purely a matter of chronology. It is shaped by what we do, how we live, and perhaps most importantly, by whether we understand how memory actually works. For most of human history, memory was treated as a mysterious faculty, a kind of internal library whose contents either remained or faded for reasons no one could fully explain. Only in the last century have we begun to understand that memory is not a thing you have, but a process your brain performs. And like any process, it can be understood, supported, and in some respects, improved. This is not a promise of miraculous transformation. No one is suggesting you can develop a perfect memory in later life. But the evidence is clear that the trajectory of memory with age is more flexible than once believed. By understanding a few fundamental principles, how memories form, what strengthens them, what weakens them, you can create conditions that support your memory for years to come. What follows is not a program or a protocol. It is an explanation, a calm, careful look at what science has learned about memory, and what that knowledge might mean for anyone interested in keeping their mind clear and reliable as the years accumulate. The architecture of remembering. To understand why memory changes with age. It helps to understand what memory is in the first place. Most people imagine memory as a storage system, a kind of mental filing cabinet where experiences are tucked away for later retrieval. This is a useful metaphor, but it is not quite accurate. The brain does not store memories the way a computer stores files. It reconstructs them. Every experience you have is the result of specific patterns of activity in your brain. Neurons, the cells that make up your nervous system, fire in particular sequences when you see a face, hear a voice, or walk through a familiar room. Memory is simply the increased likelihood that those same patterns of activity will occur again in the future. When you remember something, you are not pulling a file from a drawer. You are reactivating a network of connections, rebuilding the experience from scattered pieces. This is why memory feels different from other mental functions. It is not a single thing, but a collection of related processes, each with its own characteristics and vulnerabilities. Understanding these distinctions helps explain why some memories last while others fade, and why aging affects different types of memory in different ways. The most familiar form of memory is the one you use every moment of every day. Psychologists call it working memory, though a better name might be immediate awareness. It is the ability to hold a small amount of information in mind for a short period, a phone number you just looked up, the items you need from the grocery store, the thread of a conversation you are following. Working memory is limited and fragile. It can hold only a few pieces of information at once, and unless you use that information or consciously rehearse it, it vanishes within seconds. Beyond working memory lies short-term memory, which can retain information for minutes or hours. If someone tells you their name and you repeat it to yourself a few times, it might linger in short-term memory long enough to be useful. But without further effort, it too will fade. Long-term memory is different. It can hold information for days, years, decades. This is where your life resides, the names of people you love, the layout of the home where you grew up, the skills you have acquired, the stories that make up your personal history. Long-term memory is not a single system, but a family of related systems, each with its own rules. Some long-term memories are explicit. You know that you know them. If someone asks your birth date or the color of your first car, you can declare the answer. These explicit memories depend heavily on a structure deep in the brain called the hippocampus. Think of the hippocampus as a kind of gateway. New experiences pass through it, and if conditions are right, they are gradually consolidated into more permanent storage elsewhere in the brain. The hippocampus itself does not hold memories forever. It is the entry point, not the archive. Other memories are implicit. You do not need to think about them consciously. When you walk, you do not instruct each muscle in sequence. When you ride a bicycle, you do not calculate the physics of balance. Your body simply knows what to do. These procedural memories are formed and stored in different brain regions: the cerebellum, the basal ganglia, the motor cortex. They operate beneath awareness, which makes them both durable and resistant to certain kinds of forgetting. This distinction between explicit and implicit memory explains one of the most fascinating observations in all of neuroscience. People who lose the ability to form new explicit memories, who cannot remember a conversation from 5 minutes ago, can still learn new skills. They can improve at a task with practice, even though they have no conscious memory of having practiced it. Their implicit memory system remains intact, quietly learning, while their explicit memory system has been silenced. This tells us something profound. Memory is not one thing. It is many things, layered together, each with its own vulnerabilities and strengths. And this is why the aging of memory is not a simple, uniform decline. Some types of memory hold up remarkably well with age, while others become more fragile. Understanding which is which, and why, is the first step towards supporting memory over the long term. The hippocampus and the fragility of new learning. If there is a single structure in the brain that deserves special attention in any discussion of aging and memory, it is the hippocampus. This small, curved region, located on each side of the brain, is essential for forming new explicit memories. Without it, new experiences cannot be consolidated into lasting recollection. The hippocampus is also unusually vulnerable to the effects of aging. It is sensitive to stress hormones, to reduced blood flow, to the cumulative wear and tear of decades. In many people, the hippocampus shrinks with age, and this shrinkage correlates with changes in memory function. This is why the most common memory complaint among older adults involves new learning. Names of new people, details of recent conversations, where you placed your glasses an hour ago. These all depend on hippocampal function. When the hippocampus is not working as well as it once did, these kinds of memories become elusive. But here is the important nuance. Memories that were formed years or decades ago are not stored in the hippocampus. They have been consolidated elsewhere, distributed across networks in the neocortex. This is why someone can struggle to remember what they ate for breakfast, but still vividly recall childhood events. The old memories are stored in different places, using different systems. They are not immune to aging, but they are less dependent on the vulnerable hippocampus. This pattern, sparing of remote memory, difficulty with new learning, is so common that it is almost a signature of healthy cognitive aging. It is not a sign of disease. It is a reflection of how memory systems are organized and which parts of the brain are most sensitive to the passage of time. The practical implication is straightforward. If you want to support your memory as you age, pay special attention to the conditions that support hippocampal function. This structure thrives on certain kinds of experiences and suffers under others. Understanding what helps and what harms can make a real difference in how well new learning is preserved. The chemistry of lasting impressions. Why do some experiences stick while others slide away? This question has fascinated thinkers for centuries. Francis Bacon, writing in 1620, observed that memory is assisted by anything that touches the passions, fear, wonder, shame, joy. He was right, but he did not know why. Modern research has filled in the details. The reason emotional experiences are remembered so vividly is that they trigger the release of specific chemicals in the brain and body. These chemicals, adrenaline is the most important, act as a signal that says, in effect, this matters. Strengthen the connections that were just active. Adrenaline is released from two sources. The adrenal glands, perched atop the kidneys, release it into the bloodstream, where it quickens the heart, changes breathing patterns, and prepares the body for action. At the same time, a small structure in the brain called the locus coeruleus releases its own supply of adrenaline, sprinkling it throughout the brain to create a state of heightened alertness. When adrenaline is present, the brain becomes more plastic. Connections between neurons that were active just before the adrenaline surge are selectively strengthened. This is why events that trigger strong emotions, positive or negative, are seared into memory. The adrenaline creates a window of enhanced consolidation, and whatever happened during that window gets special treatment. The timing is critical. The adrenaline surge must occur during or immediately after the experience for it to enhance memory. If it comes too early, it primes the brain for alertness but does not selectively strengthen the neural patterns that were just active. If it comes too late, the window has closed. This timing principle has practical implications. Most people, if they use any kind of stimulant to support mental function, take it before they engage in mental work. A cup of coffee before studying. A cup of tea before a lecture. But the research suggests that for memory specifically, the opposite timing may be more effective. A stimulant taken after learning, when the material is fresh but the consolidation window is still open, may do more to strengthen memory than the same stimulant taken beforehand. This is not a recommendation to change anyone's habits. It is simply an observation about how the system works. If you understand that adrenaline enhances consolidation, and that consolidation happens in the minutes and hours after an experience, You can see why the timing matters. The question is not whether to use stimulants, but when to use them if memory enhancement is the goal. Of course, adrenaline is not the only chemical involved. Cortisol, another stress hormone, also plays a role, though its effects are more complex. Brief elevations of cortisol can support memory, but chronic elevation, the kind that comes with ongoing stress, damages the hippocampus and impairs memory over time. The difference between acute and chronic is everything. A sharp spike after learning helps. Constant elevation hurts. This is one of the great ironies of the stress response. The same system that stamps down memories in moments of excitement or danger becomes destructive when it never shuts off. The hippocampus, so sensitive to these chemicals, pays the price for a nervous system that cannot find rest, movement, and the messages from bone. For much of the 20th century, the brain was viewed as something separate from the body, a kind of command center that issued orders but was itself insulated from the effects of physical activity. That view has changed dramatically. We now understand that the brain and body are in constant, two-way communication, and that what happens in the body shapes what happens in the brain. One of the most surprising discoveries in this area involves the skeleton. Bones, it turns out, are not just structural supports. They are endocrine organs, releasing hormones that travel through the bloodstream and affect distant tissues, including the brain. The most important of these bone-derived hormones for memory is called osteocalcin. When you engage in load-bearing exercise, walking, running, lifting, anything that puts mechanical stress on the skeleton, your bones release osteocalcin into the circulation. This hormone travels to the brain, where it crosses into the hippocampus and enhances the function of neurons there. It supports the formation of new connections, the maintenance of existing ones, and the overall health of this memory-critical region. The logic is elegant. Your brain needs to know that your body is moving. Movement requires coordination, spatial awareness, memory of where you are and where you are going. By releasing osteocalcin in response to mechanical load, your bones send a signal that says, "The body is active." Update the brain's maps and memories accordingly. This may explain why sedentary animals, in certain species, actually digest portions of their own nervous system. When movement stops, the signal from bone diminishes, and the brain interprets this as a cue that less neural infrastructure is needed. The system is use-dependent. Move, and the brain receives support. Stop moving, and that support fades. The practical takeaway is straightforward. Regular load-bearing exercise, the kind that puts gentle stress on bones and joints, is not just good for your body. It is good for your memory. The benefits are not immediate or dramatic, but they accumulate over time. A person who walks regularly, who lifts weights occasionally, who engages in activities that require the skeleton to bear weight, is sending a continuous signal to the brain. Maintain the circuits. Keep the hippocampus healthy. Preserve the ability to form new memories. This is not about intense training or athletic performance. It is about consistent, moderate mechanical loading, a daily walk, a weekly strength session, gardening, climbing stairs. These are the kinds of activities that stimulate osteocalcin release and support hippocampal function. They are accessible to almost anyone, at almost any age, and their effects on memory are supported by a growing body of evidence. Attention and the limits of awareness. Before any experience can become a memory, it must first be perceived. This seems obvious, but it has implications that are easy to overlook. You cannot remember what you did not notice in the first place. Attention is the gateway to memory. The brain is bombarded with sensory information at every moment: sights, sounds, textures, smells, tastes. It cannot process all of it. Instead, It selects a small subset for further handling. The rest is filtered out, discarded, never encoded. This filtering is not a flaw. It is a necessity. If you were aware of every sensation at once, you would be overwhelmed, unable to function. Attention is the mechanism that keeps the stream of experience manageable. It highlights what matters and suppresses what does not. But attention is also limited and fragile. It can be divided, distracted, depleted. When you try to do two things at once, you are not truly doing both. You are switching rapidly between them, and each switch costs something. The depth of processing suffers. The richness of encoding diminishes. This is why multitasking is the enemy of memory. When you split your attention, you reduce the amount of neural activity devoted to any one thing. And since memory depends on the strength of neural activity, weaker encoding means poorer recall later. The person who listens to a podcast while reading a book, who checks their phone during a conversation, who lets their mind wander while someone is speaking, is systematically undermining their own memory formation. The solution is not complicated, but it requires intention. When something matters, a name, a face, a piece of information you want to keep, give it your full attention for a few moments. Look at the person. Say their name aloud. Form a mental image. Create a small burst of focused neural activity. This single act, repeated consistently, can dramatically improve how well new information sticks. This is not about concentration in some abstract sense. It is about giving the brain what it needs to encode. Attention is the raw material of memory. Without it, nothing else matters. The surprising value of mental snapshots. There is a peculiar phenomenon that many people have experienced, but few have examined. Occasionally, without any particular reason, you look at a scene and decide to capture it mentally, a kind of internal photograph. Years later, that scene remains vivid, while countless other moments from the same period have faded. This experience turns out to be more than a curiosity. Research has confirmed that the deliberate act of taking a mental snapshot enhances visual memory significantly. When you consciously frame a scene in your mind, when you decide that this moment is worth keeping, your brain treats it differently. The encoding is deeper, the retention longer. What is fascinating is that this effect does not require a camera. The act of intention alone is sufficient. Deciding to remember changes the probability that you will. The mechanism likely involves attention and the allocation of neural resources. When you decide to take a mental photograph, you focus more intently on the scene. You notice details you might otherwise miss, the quality of light, the arrangement of objects, the expression on a face. This richer encoding creates a more robust memory trace, one that can be reactivated more easily later. There is a trade-off. However, the same research shows that enhancing visual memory through intentional snapshotting comes at a cost to auditory memory. If you take a mental photograph of a scene, you will remember what you saw better, but you will remember what you heard less well. The brain allocates resources competitively. Strengthening one type of encoding can weaken another. This has practical implications. If you want to remember what someone said, looking at them intently may not be the best strategy. Closing your eyes, reducing visual input, can actually improve auditory memory by freeing up neural resources for processing sound. The opposite is also true. If you want to remember a visual scene, limit competing auditory information. These are small adjustments, but they reflect a larger principle. Memory is not a passive recording. It is an active construction, shaped by where you direct your attention and what you decide matters. By making conscious choices about what to encode and how, you can influence what sticks and what fades. The restorative power of sleep. No discussion of memory would be complete without considering sleep. The relationship between sleep and memory is one of the most thoroughly documented findings in all of neuroscience. Sleep is not simply a period of rest. It is a time of active consolidation, when the brain replays the day's experiences, strengthens important connections, and prunes away irrelevant ones. Different stages of sleep serve different memory functions. Deep sleep, sometimes called slow-wave sleep, is particularly important for consolidating explicit memories, facts, events, names. During deep sleep, the hippocampus and neocortex communicate, gradually transferring memories from temporary storage to more permanent locations. This is why a good night's sleep after learning something new dramatically improves recall. REM sleep, the stage associated with vivid dreaming, plays a different role. It supports emotional memory and the integration of new information with existing knowledge. It is during REM that the brain makes creative connections, finding patterns and associations that were not apparent during waking. The practical implications are clear. Protecting sleep is protecting memory. When sleep is shortened, fragmented, or poor in quality, consolidation suffers. The work of learning is incomplete. Memories that might have lasted fade more quickly. This becomes more important with age because sleep itself changes. Deep sleep decreases. Sleep becomes lighter, more easily disrupted. The architecture of sleep shifts in ways that make consolidation more difficult. This is not inevitable decline. There are things that support better sleep at any age, but it is a reality that must be acknowledged. Consistency matters. A regular sleep schedule, a dark and cool bedroom, a wind-down routine that signals to the nervous system that the day is ending. These are not luxuries. They are supports for the memory system, as important as any mental exercise or dietary strategy. Brief periods of rest during the day can also help. Short naps, particularly those that include some deep sleep, can enhance memory consolidation. Even non-sleep deep rest, a period of quiet wakefulness, lying down with eyes closed, may provide some of the same benefits. The brain does not need to be unconscious to consolidate. It needs to be disengaged from active processing, free to replay and strengthen the patterns that matter. Meditation and the training of attention. If attention is the gateway to memory, then anything that improves attention should support memory. This is the logic behind the growing interest in meditation as a tool for cognitive health. Research has shown that regular meditation practice can improve attention, memory, and emotional regulation. In one study, people with no previous meditation experience practiced for 13 minutes daily. After 8 weeks, they showed measurable improvements in multiple cognitive measures compared to a control group. Their attention was sharper. Their memory was better. Their ability to regulate emotion had improved. The mechanism appears to involve the prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for attention, planning, and self-control. Meditation strengthens this region, enhancing its function and its connections with other parts of the brain. The result is a more focused, more resilient attentional system, exactly the kind of system that supports good memory encoding. But the same research revealed an important nuance. Many participants in the study practiced their meditation late in the evening. And for these individuals, sleep quality suffered. The attentive state cultivated during meditation, while beneficial for cognition, can interfere with sleep if practiced too close to bedtime. The solution is timing. Meditation for cognitive enhancement is best done earlier in the day, morning or afternoon, when its alerting effects are welcome and its impact on sleep is minimized. This allows you to gain the attentional benefits without disrupting the consolidation that happens during sleep. 13 minutes a day is not a large investment. It is less time than most people spend scrolling through news or social media. Over 8 weeks, it adds up to about 12 hours, less than half a day, for measurable improvements in cognitive function. The return on investment is substantial. Chronic stress and the cost of constant alertness. If acute stress enhances memory, chronic stress does the opposite. The same chemicals that stamp down memories when released briefly become toxic when present continuously. The hippocampus is particularly vulnerable to the effects of chronic stress. Prolonged elevation of cortisol damages hippocampal neurons, inhibits the growth of new connections, and over time, can lead to measurable shrinkage of this critical structure. The result is impaired memory, particularly for new learning. This is not theoretical. Studies of people with chronically high stress levels show clear deficits in memory function. Caregivers under constant pressure, workers in high-demand jobs without adequate recovery, individuals living in difficult circumstances, all show changes in memory that correlate with their stress levels. The good news is that the effects are at least partially reversible. When stress is reduced, when the nervous system is allowed to return to baseline, the hippocampus can recover. New connections can form. Function can improve. This is why recovery matters. Periods of rest, of low demand, of safety and calm, are not optional extras. They are essential maintenance for the memory system. The nervous system evolved to cycle between states, alertness and rest, action and recovery. When that cycle is disrupted, when alertness becomes constant, the system breaks down. Practical recovery can take many forms. Sleep is the most obvious. But also important are periods of low stimulation, walking without headphones, sitting quietly, spending time in nature, engaging in activities that are absorbing but not demanding. These are not wasted hours. They are the times when the brain consolidates, repairs, and prepares for the next round of learning. The social dimension of memory. Humans are social creatures, and memory is shaped by social context. The people around you, the conversations you have, the stories you tell and hear. All of these influence what you remember and how well your memory functions over time. There is evidence that social engagement supports cognitive health. People with rich social networks, who regularly interact with others, tend to maintain better memory function as they age. The reasons are likely multiple. Social interaction provides cognitive stimulation following conversations, remembering names and details, tracking relationships. It provides emotional support, buffering against stress. It provides motivation and meaning, reasons to stay engaged with the world. Conversely, social isolation is a risk factor for cognitive decline. When social contact diminishes, so does cognitive stimulation. The brain gets less practice at the kinds of tasks that support memory, listening, responding, remembering, connecting. This does not mean that everyone needs to be extroverted or constantly surrounded by people. Quality matters more than quantity. A few meaningful relationships, regular contact with people who matter, can provide the same benefits as a large social network. The key is engagement, interactions that require attention, memory, and emotional connection. Stories are particularly important. Telling stories requires organizing events in sequence, remembering details, connecting past to present. Hearing stories requires following that sequence, holding details in mind, making connections. Both are forms of memory practice, woven into the fabric of social life. The bigger picture. Memory as a reflection of life. Memory is not a separate function that can be isolated and trained like a muscle. It is a reflection of everything else: how you live, what you pay attention to, how you manage stress, how well you sleep, how much you move, who you spend time with. All of these shape memory, for better or worse. This is both liberating and demanding. It is liberating because it means there are many paths to supporting memory. You do not need to find the single perfect intervention. You need to create a life that, over time, provides the conditions memory needs. It is demanding because it means there is no quick fix, no supplement, no exercise, no meditation practice can compensate for a life that systematically undermines memory. The benefits accumulate slowly, from many directions, over long periods. Consistency matters more than intensity. The research points to a few broad principles. Protect sleep. Manage stress. Move your body, especially in ways that load the skeleton. Pay attention when something matters. Take mental snapshots of what you want to remember. Engage with others. Give your brain time to consolidate, both through sleep and through quiet wakefulness. Understand that memory is not one thing, but many, and that different strategies support different kinds of remembering. None of this is about achieving perfection. No one remembers everything. Forgetting is normal, necessary, part of how the brain works. The goal is not to eliminate forgetting, but to support the memory you have, to create conditions that allow your brain to do what it does best. The years accumulate. That is the nature of life. But how they accumulate, what you carry forward, what fades, what remains vivid, is shaped by the patterns you establish. Memory is not just a record of the past. It is a living process, active in every moment, responding to how you live now. Understanding that process, working with it rather than against it, is one of the most valuable investments you can make in the quality of your later years. If there is a single idea worth carrying forward from all of this, it is that memory is not a thing you have, but a process you live. It is shaped by every choice, every habit, every moment of attention or distraction, every night of restful sleep, and every day of sustained stress. The small lapses that trouble you are not verdicts. They are information, signals from a system that is responding to the conditions you create. And those conditions, for the most part, are within your reach to influence. Not perfectly, not completely, but meaningfully. Take some time to reflect on what you have heard. Notice what resonates, what questions arise, what shifts in your own understanding. If you are willing, share those thoughts in the comments, not as advice to others, but as part of a conversation among people who are thinking carefully about how to live well across the years. And if you would like to continue exploring this library of wisdom, there are other recordings waiting, other threads to follow. Subscribe if you would like to know when new ones arrive. This is the Longevity Library. Listen, learn, and live longer.